think we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to another Mass Medic webinar. My name is Nicole Owens. I am the Director of Marketing Communications for the organization. If you're not familiar with us, we are a membership-based trade association for the medical device industry that works to bolster the New England industry through education and connection, advocacy, and awareness. I do have a few housekeeping notes before we get into today's presentation. So it is being recorded, so everyone who registered will get a recorded copy of the webinar following, and we're also going to be able to share the slides today. So we'll be sending that out to you after today's webinar. And we are going to have, ample time for Q&A. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to answer those all live for you today. All right. Today, I am pleased to have our friends from Intertech with us. We are talking about corporate and product sustainability today. Really important topic. It's not just greenwashing anymore, but it's becoming imperative. So I'm going to turn it over to Clarissa and Beth from Intertech, who are going to take it away and provide today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as always, we are so excited to be here doing another Mass Medic webinar. Please feel free to put questions into the chat. As we said, we will take questions at the end. So my name is Clarissa Benfield. I am our Global Director and Business Line Leader for our medical and laboratory business at Intertech. And today I'm so pleased to be joined by our subject matter expert, Beth Mealbright. And Beth is the Associate Director at our Intertech Assurance Group. So today we're going to be talking about corporate and product sustainability, something we are both incredibly passionate about and really excited to share with all of you. Next slide. So just a quick and brief introduction to Intertech. We've done these webinars before. We're really excited to be here. We are a large global organization focused on assurance, testing, inspection, and certification, global with 46,000 plus employees, with labs and offices all around the world. And sustainability is an area that's really important to us, both as an organization from an Intertech standpoint, as well as with our manufacturers across all industries. It's something that we've been doing for quite a while, but now we've seen this become more and more prevalent with manufacturers, a bigger concern, and something that we are incredibly excited to share more about with all of you today. On the medical front, just a quick reminder of where our capabilities are and where we sit. We're positioned around the globe working with medical device manufacturers, helping them get their products to market faster, testing those for safety, EMC, cybersecurity, wireless testing, sustainability, anything you can think of. We are a key player in the medical space and happy to be here and focus on sustainability today. So as we know, we've seen the healthcare industry evolving quite rapidly over the past few years. Sustainability is gaining a lot of traction in the healthcare and medical devices space. We know that, in the medical space, we are traditionally an area that has a high reliance on single-use plastics, energy, water, right? We consume quite a bit. And now we see so many medical device manufacturers, laboratory manufacturers, really looking at how they can take this into consideration and make a promising change in the environment without compromising patient care, without compromising quality and safety. So, of course, it's not an easy topic to address. It's not something that is easy to conquer as a manufacturer, right? When you're trying to balance the safety of your product, its performance, all of the regulatory requirements. We know in the medical space, we've seen, quite an evolving regulatory landscape over the past few years. But how you balance that quality, safety, performance, regulatory with your environmental impact and your social impact, thinking with sustainability underlying what you're doing is really important. And today we're going to focus on lifecycle assessments as an area that we see medical device manufacturers and those in the healthcare space having some success in moving forward with in terms of how they're addressing some of these sustainability challenges. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth, who is our expert in lifecycle assessments, to go through some content. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat and we will address those at the end. Over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Clarissa. So when I'm talking to clients and we're focused on manufacturing, and we're focused on electronic or medical devices. The first question that comes up is where to start. And one place to go that I think is a really good place to start is with a life cycle assessment. And what that does is it maps out the carbon footprint as well as other environmental impact indicators through every phase of a device's existence. So it looks at what are the materials being used? How is it manufactured? What happens during the use phase? And what happens at end of life? And more. So when we do a life cycle assessment, we identify hotspots. So you know where to focus and take action. And I love this part because this is the Mythbusters area of life cycle assessment, or LCA, because people usually have a preconceived notion of, I think that we have a big impact in our devices because of this material, or because we ship from someplace far away, or whatever it is. But once we get the data, we build the model, and we do the analysis, we get the ground truth. And then you know where to take action instead of guessing. So when you do a life cycle assessment, you are aligning your manufacturing with your innovation goals and your corporate sustainability commitments. Because it's one thing at a corporate level to make these commitments, it's another thing to deliver on it. And knowing where you are and where you want to go with your manufacturing is a great way to make progress to them. So an LCA studies the overall environmental impacts of the life cycle of a product, a process, or an activity. A lot of people today are carbon accountants. That's all we focus on is what's the footprint? What is the carbon footprint? What's the carbon dioxide equivalent? Those are words for carbon. And when you do a life cycle assessment, you get a lot more than that. There's many more things to consider than just carbon, but it's fine. For right now, we will focus on that. And as we go through the presentation, I'll let you know where I think the future is going to go. So let's talk about some boundaries for your life cycle assessment. There's 2 types, and there can be variations on these types, but these are the 2 main types. Cradle, which means the raw materials. Gate, which means your manufacturing gate. And grave, which means end of life. Is it the landfill? What happens? So cradle to gate life cycle assessment is an analysis that takes into account all of your raw materials. What are they? Where do they come from? And then everything that happens within your manufacturing facility. Any energy that's used, what is the process, and what is the manufacturing waste? And then it stops because it is packaged up, ready at your manufacturing gate, ready to be picked up and shipped across the world. So that's cradle to gate. If you want to include more, another most common one is cradle to grave. So we include all of that, but then we actually ship it. We distribute it. Where does it go? To a distribution center. And then from the distribution center, where are your sales? Where does it go from there? And there's many different ways to model this. And the next step is once it gets into the hands of your end clients, what is the use phase? If it uses electricity, we need to calculate that. What's the lifespan of your product? So the use phase can get quite complicated. We typically need to make some assumptions, but everything gets documented there. Then at the end of your device's life, what happens? Can rare earth metals be pulled out of it? Can, if any part of it, be recycled? Is it broken down in any way? Is there a take-back program? Or is it landfill? And whatever it is, we model that. Now, I just want to say that sometimes with this process, we get involved at the R&D stage. So when there's a product development team that's looking at new manufacturing methods or new end of life, what should they do? We can model things to see what would the impact be. So you know whether to invest resources to design for it. So cradle to gate and cradle to grave. And of course, we can do lots of variations in between, but those are the two main ones. When we do a life cycle assessment, the first step we provide, my team provides summary slides to show initial results. And here we focus on carbon footprint only, even though, like I said, there's many more environmental impact indicators, which I will tell you about in a minute. And this is an example summary. Now, in our summary slides, there's many more than just this one. So this is just one slide out of a deck. And the blue bars on the right in that graph show you what we calculated for this one medical device, normalized to 1 kilogram, so a weight of 1 kilogram of it. And you can see that raw materials, in this case, make up about 35% of the carbon footprint. And manufacturing and assembly is another 25%. And a third, 33%, is end of life, with transportation, packaging, and downstream transport not as impactful. So sometimes manufacturers look at their results and say, yeah, this makes sense, I understand it. And other times they are bewildered and amazed at this is how the analysis came out, and we want to know more. So in our summary slides, we go into much more detail, breaking down all of the raw materials, finding out where those hotspots are, looking at all of the energy sources that are used in manufacturing. And we go into much more detail to provide, well, how did we get to those summaries of raw materials and all the life stages? So these are the key points, plus more. And then once these are good, we move into a full ISO compliant report, which is quite lengthy, quite detailed. When we're doing a life cycle assessment, there are multiple stages that we go through. The first is goal and scope. So we want to know from you, are you interested in satisfying a requirement for your client? Does your client want to see a carbon footprint? So you're required to do this. Is it something for research and development and you want to try out different scenarios? The first step is where we define all those things so that we're on the same page when we're doing the analysis. The second part is inventory, and that can be the hardest part for our clients. So manufacturers need to get information, and that means working with different parts of your organization, such as procurement, looking at the bill of materials. Where do you get everything from? And in some of these devices, there are thousands of components. So we're dealing with a lot of data and spreadsheets, and we need to know what the material is, how much does it weigh, and where does it come from? And then we need to talk to someone in manufacturing. What is the energy used to make it? Is it all electricity? Is there natural gas or some other type of energy? How can we quantify the energy? So that's something that our team is really skilled in, but that's a big part that you play a role in. Then it's back to us. So our team are all highly skilled and trained, including myself, in doing and creating a model. So we build an energy model of your device. We use SEMA Pro. We happen to think SEMA Pro is the world's best lifecycle assessment software. We run several multi-user licenses of it, and my team, located all around the world, is doing this analysis. And this is where we can crank the numbers and get results for you. And it involves using your data and matching it up to data sets And it's slightly complex, but we make it easy for you to understand. Then we interpret it and we show you in graphs and bullet points the key findings. Sometimes our clients want to go to market and tell the world, hey, my product has been analyzed by LCA and there is a carbon footprint and it has this number. And ISO states that if you would like to do that, you need to have a third-party review. So we facilitate that. We have a stable of third-party reviewers and we work with them to go through the third-party review process so that you can publicize your results if that's what you want to do. And if you want to even take a next step, you can get an environmental product declaration. That's what EPD stands for. And right now for electronic and medical devices, we're working with PEP Eco Passport out of France. And there's others that are coming online soon to be able to offer this to you. So we do the full thing, everything that you need for an LCA and how you want to share it with your clients or keep it to yourselves. This is something that is good to know for either our team or any LCA consultant you work with. So here I'm going to show you some, not all, of the environmental impacts that get analyzed in your model. So when we create a model, it's about energy, it's about the carbon footprint, and much more. So this first bullet point, carbon footprint, is also known as global warming potential. And the units are in kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent, CO2 equivalent. So usually people stop there, but wait, there's more. You will find out about ozone and eutrophication, toxicity, fossil fuel, and water. So I told you I would tell you what I think the future is going with LCA, and it's water. I think after we are done being carbon accountants, soon we will move forward into looking at water use. And we'll be using LCA to disclose and talk about water. So someday we'll get there, but there's these and so many more environmental impacts. So this is about life cycle assessment. And when you're looking at products, this is where you should focus. If you want to consider sustainability from the whole corporate side, we're going to talk about greenhouse gases. There's all kinds of graphics to explain greenhouse gases, and some of them are so complicated. I love this one because it's simple. So, as an organization, at the corporate level, for every office, every manufacturing facility, everything you own or you lease, there is greenhouse gas accounting. So you can conduct basically a carbon footprint of your company. And scope 1 is about what do you own and the fuel that you need to heat those buildings. And it's also called stationary combustion, but basically it's any vehicles that are fossil fuel powered. So any gas cars or trucks, and the heating for your buildings and manufacturing facilities. Scope 2 is about your purchased energy. And if you buy renewable energy credits or you use renewable sources, either on-site or through power purchase agreements, that all falls into scope 2. And also your electrically powered vehicles. And then everything else is in the supply chain. So that's scope 3. Scope 3 is usually the biggest impact. And that is, where are you buying everything from? Buying everything from office supplies to raw materials to make your product. And then what happens afterwards. So I'll tell you a little bit more about scope 3 as we go into it. But if we analyze the carbon footprint for all of these things, that is the greenhouse gas accounting for your company. So when you want to do this at a corporate level, what does it look like? What do you have to do? And so this yellow box is about the corporate greenhouse gas inventory and calculation. So it's not looking at one single product. That's what an LCA is, a life cycle assessment. This is looking at everything in an organization. The time frame is for one fiscal year, and so whether it's a calendar year or not, a fiscal year, and we analyze all of these things. And the blue box says we need to get data from all across the organization. This is not just a finance job. It's not just a manufacturing job. Everybody needs to contribute. So like in the 3 gray boxes, that corresponds to the graph we just saw. So we're going to look at greenhouse gases from heating your buildings and powering your trucks and cars, from your electricity, and also from the supply chain, both upstream and downstream. So when we look at our scope 3, which is the value chain, we can divide it into 2 parts, upstream and downstream. The biggest one for most everybody, unless you're maybe a bank or investment company, but if you are making something, your largest scope 3 category is number 1, purchase goods and services. You got to buy stuff to make stuff with it. So that's a whole specialty in calculating that. And when you hear people talk about, yes, we calculated our scope 3 emissions, what that means is that they did one of 2 things. They either said, what's easy? And that's a fine place to start. I'm all for easy. What is the easiest thing to start with? And typically it might be business travel, because you already have receipts and there's all kinds of tools to do that calculation. So that could be easy. Employee commuting, easy to do a survey. Those are typically 2 of the easier ones to do. Or the second one is, what is material? And material means, like in a financial sense, what is the most impactful and largest that we should focus on? And for most manufacturers, if you look at what's material, it's probably going to be your purchase goods and services, number 1. It's probably going to be, it could be capital goods, it could be use of sold products and end of life treatment, so downstream. But sometimes you don't know until you do an assessment of this. But most manufacturers are not franchises, so you can cross number 14 off your list. Most manufacturers don't have to worry about that. So this is not a list where you have to do all 15. You do what is most impactful, and if you're not sure, start with what's easy. So here is a graph. This is a graph of a representative nonprofit US healthcare system. This is the closest I could find without naming a medical device manufacturer and taking it directly from their ESG report. So I know you're not a nonprofit, I know you're not a healthcare system, but if we just look at this, the royal blue is scope 2. So that's all their electricity. And then right above it, at about 9 o'clock, is scope 1. And so that's the heating and the fuel for their vehicles. So just that little percentage, just those 2 wedges, scope 1 and 2, everything else is scope 3. And if you can see up about 1 or 2 o'clock, purchase goods and services is 41%. And while this is not your company, it is typically true that purchase goods and services is quite high. And getting into that is something to dive into when you want to figure out what to do for sustainability and what your corporate carbon footprint is. For this healthcare system, you can see at about 5 o'clock, they have in the green section investments. So that doesn't apply to everyone, but that in this case, investments are very high. So that's just a quick summary of what the distribution and relative impact of scope 1, 2, and 3 might look like. So when you're looking at sustainability in your organization, there is a nice white paper by BCG about medtech. And while their white paper is focused and they have some data on medtech, these here apply to any manufacturer. So you'll get these slides so you can read all the little tiny words. I'm going to focus on high level here. And the first thing to do when you're looking at either a corporate greenhouse gas accounting or a life cycle assessment for your product on a product basis is to get support organizationally. You need to have a cross-functional team to do this, and there needs to be a high-level champion who is willing to invest and put the time in. You're all busy. You all have a job, and adding sustainability can feel overwhelming. So it helps to spread it out among different people and work together as a team. So that first column is create supporting organizational structures. The second thing is that it says realize business value and competitive advantage. None of this gets done unless there's a business case for it. Suddenly, when there's a business case, things happen. I've had plenty of clients say, you know, we're thinking about doing this, but we're not ready yet. And then a few months later, they come back really in a hurry saying, oh my gosh, we have to get this done because we can't sell to our biggest client unless we have these numbers. They're looking for our carbon footprint on a corporate level, or they're looking for our product level, which from an LCA. We need to get this done. Let's hurry, hurry, hurry. And when there's a business case, things happen. So look for that and use that to your advantage. Then translate what you want to do, what your goals are, into a roadmap, because you'll get a lot of information from either one of these analyses. And it's helpful to think about it and say, well, what do I want to do with this? What is my goal? And third, there can be a lot of data. And so working with software platforms or any other kind of IT system. So you'll want to rely on the IT systems you have now or upgrade and put another module in place that can help you, because all of these things, either way, corporate or life cycle assessment, there's a lot of data involved. And then the next thing is, after you get started, you'll be surprised at data quality. And you'll say, you know, I think we can do better. I think we can fine tune this. I think this is an assumption and we can do better. So you'll be looking to improve data quality. Those are major steps to focus on, whether you're looking at corporate level or product level sustainability assessments. So Clarissa and I were talking about some frequently asked questions that she gets and I get about life cycle assessments for medical devices. Clarissa, should we jump into these now?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, if anyone wants to put other questions in the chat, we'll be getting to those soon as well. But one of the common questions that we see from manufacturers, what challenges should we as a manufacturer expect as part of an LCA, as part of a life cycle assessment?
Good question. So when we start the process, it's about getting information from you. So a challenge could be, you've got a bill of material, but you've never thought about the energy of manufacturing. So now you haven't really talked to your production team. And we need to do that. either whether it's overseas, whether it's in a different location, we need to work with them. So it actually strengthens your manufacturing because now you're finding out, well, how is that made? What do we do to put this together? Is it just there's assembly in one location, but we're doing circuit board manufacturing over here? Anyway, that is a challenge that I think actually becomes beneficial for product development teams when they finally understand how everything goes together. So getting the information can be a challenge. I know I love working with my teams and helping get all that information so we can do the LCA.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. So another question that we get quite frequently is just about using an LCA to compare different alternative materials or different devices. Like, can you use LCA as a tool in that way?
Yes. Yep. So let's talk about materials. So if you're in the research and development and of your product and you're thinking that maybe you want to change out different materials or see what the impact of a recycled version of a metal or plastic resin would be, that is great. It's used internally. And yes, we can definitely do analyses and those can be compared so you can see what the impact will be. Of course, you're making sure that performance won't be sacrificed, but yes, we can show the relative difference in comparison for materials. And the other question about can we compare it to alternative medical devices? So every industry wants to say, hey, mine's the best, and I want to compare it to the traditional incumbent, what's conventionally been done. Now, if you want to do that, there are rules about it. You need to provide that manufacturing information. Typically, unless you have already made that in your past, like that was your Gen 1 product, and now you're on Gen 3 or 5, you know what those materials are, and you know you have that information. But if you're looking to say, my competitor is still doing things the old-fashioned way, and mine is greener and cleaner and better, that gets into tricky territory. And we don't like to call out and do analyses on a named competitor product. And ISO actually has some guidance on that. And should there be a comparison, a direct comparison between either a generic or a named competitor's product, there is a requirement to have a panel review of at least 3 reviewers. And so we need 3 reviewers. One of them needs to be the chair of this little committee, and it's quite vigorous. The last one took about almost 1 year to get through review.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it sometimes might not be worth it. And if you're going, usually when you want to do that, it's because you want to make a public claim, and comparisons like that are yeah, they're very risky. So there's a lot that needs to be done to make sure they're in place. So we kind of stay away from making claims and comparisons to incumbents unless it's your own, and that's a different story.
Yeah. And then how do you communicate results of an LCA effectively? So, you know, if I get these results, how do I effectively then communicate what I get back?
Great. Okay. So if you do a life cycle assessment, part of that goal and scope is to figure out what you want to do with it. And one option is just to keep it internally, to just use it for yourself and not share it. The second way is you want to share it. So if you're going to do that, we need to facilitate the third-party review. And then when that happens, you'll get a document saying that this was reviewed. And the thing is, though, is that you really don't want to share a 70-page life cycle assessment report or put that on your website, because that has your proprietary information in it, and it's long and lengthy. So there isn't a standard format yet, but a third-party reviewed life cycle assessment, what I typically see is a 1 or 2 page document on company letterhead that says, this is what was analyzed, these are the results, and here is the statement that it is verified by a third-party reviewer. So that is what people do. And if you want to go the extra step, there is an environmental product declaration, which is the third document that could be generated, and you can use that as well. So don't go sharing your life cycle assessment with the world. It's confidential information. There are ways to do it, and you can only do it if it's been verified.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion and a good point that it has to be verified if you want to put that information out publicly. So really good reference. We do have a couple of questions that came in from the audience that we can go through as well. So one of the questions that came through, I know we touched on it a little bit with the different models, but how do you model these things with an LCA or something else? And this came up early on when we were talking about the cradle to gate, cradle to grave. So is LCA the only way to model, or are there other alternate options instead of an LCA when you're putting together a model?
The term life cycle assessment is what is used to create a model. Now, there's many different types of software. We use something called SEMA Pro. There's Gabby. There's online tools, multiple different ways. You can do this yourself or have someone in your company do this. You can hire a consultant. There are many consultants out there. But life cycle assessment is how to create, is how you go about doing it. It is the generic term for going through this process. And you get to choose what method you use. It's more complicated than a spreadsheet. That's why there are all these software tools out there.
Perfect. So the next question that came through is, can you provide some timeframes for an LCA? So the cradle to gate, cradle to grave, what are we looking at in terms of different timeframes?
Great. Okay. So once we know what the scope is and we're under contract and we have a kickoff meeting and we're ready to go with your life cycle assessment, the next step is to get data. And I facilitate that with you and help you with filling in the spreadsheet. And this is not a final exam. This is like, I want to see your work as you're going through it. And that takes a little while. Some clients have done it in as short as 2 weeks. Others take 6 months. It depends on motivation and resources to get the information. So that's the beginning step, is getting information from you, which I, either myself or someone else on my team, is reviewing and checking all along the way to make sure you're on the right track. The last thing we want you to do is submit a detailed spreadsheet of information to us and we say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Something's wrong here. So we're checking it as you're going. Once we're both clear that all of your data is complete and accurate, then I turn it over to my LCA team. I no longer do LCA analysis. I don't have time for it, but I have dedicated people all over the world who do. And the process for modeling, we get it in the queue, and it typically takes about 1 month for your model to be done and for you to get summary slides, just like the graph I showed, that have a deck that has maybe a dozen slides that show, here's your initial results. And so that's after 1 month. We go over that, we say, hey, does this make sense? Does anything look out of place? We want to check. Was there a number wrong in the data? Did we make a mistake? We want to see that things are making sense. Then with your approval, we move on to reporting. And reporting takes another month. And then at the end of that, you have your full ISO LCA report. If you want it third-party reviewed, that is another month after that. So reviewers are in hot demand. And so I'm always scheduling with them and trying to get on their calendars. And so if from receipt of data through to a third-party verified life cycle assessment is about 3 months. And one more thing, Clarissa, that applies whether it's cradle to gate or cradle to gate grave. Yes, there's more work with more things to analyze, but that's just a rough time frame.
Perfect. And then we have one last question that came in. So this is a great question. I work for a medical device development company. They're more focused on design and development rather than manufacturing of devices. One of our biggest challenges is the lack of eco-friendly materials for prototyping. Wondering if you have any feedback on this. Do we as developers just focus on product design to the best of our abilities and leave material optimization to the manufacturers in later stages, i.e. swap in eco-friendly materials later?
I think it's best to do it right from where you are at your design stage. That is great to do. So for prototyping, right, there is a difference between prototyping materials and production materials. So if you're talking about, is it necessary to do an LCA for prototype and short production run and materials that might not be what is used in final production, maybe LCA is not needed at that point, but you could do, what we could do is, the materials, the weights, and you could specify, like, right now we're using this resin, and when we go to production, we suggest using one of these other two, and we could model those to show alternatives. We do that in a separate analysis, so you could see the impacts. Sometimes there's a big impact, sometimes it's not so big at all. That sometimes swapping out metals for plastics, metals have a high carbon footprint. So yeah, there's definitely a difference between prototyping and production run. And it is possible to do an LCA to look at what the impacts will be in production.
Perfect. All right. Another good question here. I've been having a hard time finding an online community for sustainability for medical devices. I wonder if you have any other recommendations on relevant conferences or other online resources besides Intertech and Massmedic.
Wow. Online community, I would search out. So there are life cycle assessment associations, conferences. They're not going to focus on this industry. Clarissa and Nicole, you would know more about other industry associations. Sustainability is a hot topic in every industry. Whether or not they're talking about life cycle assessment is another story. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Beth. But I do think we're seeing a lot more conferences. We're seeing a lot more events that are focusing on sustainability or incorporating them as part of, an overall workshop or as part of an overall session and discussion, right? When you think about some of the large medical conferences that are coming up, we do see sustainability as a topic because we see a lot of manufacturers focusing in this space and wanting to understand, how we as a greater, healthcare and medical community can be more sustainable, just knowing that, there are some things that are inherently not sustainable about the medical industry. So there is a lot of good resource. I think if you start looking into some of the either large national conferences or the more local specialized conferences for medical devices, you can find people there, panels and experts who are talking on the topic. Nicole, I don't know if you have any other thoughts too. I know you guys have some stuff coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Clarissa. Yeah, I would just echo that. Some of our upcoming events, including our annual MedTech Impact Symposium, which is going to be in March this year, is going to have content focused on sustainability. I would also just add, reach out to Massmedic at info@massmedic.com. We do a number of roundtables and discussion groups to support the industry, and sustainability is always a really in demand area. So we do have resources there that are not broadly advertised if you reach out to us.
Yeah, Nicole, I think that was the last live question that we had come in, so I think we'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for your time. Tons of good information. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. This is a sponsored webinar, so I would like to thank our friends at Intertech for providing this valuable content today. We cannot share this expertise without partnerships like yours, so thank you. Please go to massmedic.com and check out all the other great events we have coming up. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.